Machine translation has existed for decades, but only in the last few years, with the advent of machine learning and neural networks, has machine translation really become a viable tool for translation fulfillment. My name is Andrew, and I head up product at SmartLing, and I'm joined by Valerie, who is SmartLing's Director of Language Services, and Ben, who is a Principal Engineer at SmartLing, working our data and machine learning team. We're going to be discussing what we hear from our customers and linguists about MT, different types of MT and machine learning solutions, and where we see the future of MT going. At SmartLing, we don't imagine translators are going anywhere, but machine translation can be one part of an entire translation solution. Many people that think they want to use MT or are using it, but not sure how or why, or even know what to expect. We call these types of people MT curious, and we should all be a little MT curious right now. Let's get started. Valerie, you work with many of our customers for language services. What are you hearing from customers regarding MT? What are customers signaling to you?
Well, they're certainly signaling that they are curious about machine translation. They all mention it. They all say they'd like to use it. But what we see is that when it's really time to actually implement it, they are a little bit hesitant because they don't know what kind of trade-offs they're making. Are they giving up quality, or how is it going to work? So it is, there's definitely an appetite, but still a little bit hesitant to adopt it.
Right. Are there things that people are really looking for? Like they want maybe different types of, they're curious, but hesitant. So like there's quality, there's savings, they're trying to get better throughput. What are the kind of combination of things that you're seeing?
Well, they want it all, right?
They want it all, of course.
They want the high quality, faster and cheaper, or maybe not cheaper, but at the very least, within the same budgets. They have more content, more and more content all the time, and they're trying to accomplish what they need to accomplish with the same budget. So looking at different solutions that would be at different prices. So human translation is definitely the favorite because that's where we get the highest quality. But machine translation can come in play because there's a cost saving opportunity there.
Certainly, yeah. I was looking at some data on MT usage in the platform, and from 2019 to now, the usage has increased over 2,100%. So 2,100%. I think in April of 2019, there was like 6 million words a month or something going through with MT. And I think last month it was like 135 million or something. So like MT usage has picked up dramatically. When you talk to, there's always kind of a double-edged sword, of course, because there's the customer who wants everything, but there's also linguists on the other side who have to kind of deal with it. What do you hear from linguists?
Well, linguists are, they're often a little bit worried. They're wondering, am I going to be replaced? No, absolutely not. There is always going to be room for human translation and a need for human translation. The machine translation has improved, certainly, but not to the point where it reads as fluently or idiomatically as what a professional translator would produce. So this little there's worry for sure, and there's also pushback because some of the machine translations for certain languages are not ready, and it takes as much work to correct the machine as it would take to start from scratch. So there's definitely a recognition that it brings more efficiency and that it is part of the toolbox, but they're a little bit, hesitant yet.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And that's an interesting point, because I know whenever often we think about it, we're like, oh, just turn on machine translation on the translation step or whatever. And we're saying apply it to all 60 languages that a customer might have. But really, it's more nuanced than that. And maybe it's not really shouldn't be used for some languages, and maybe could be used solely for others. And it really depends on the language and type of content and things like that. Ben, worked a lot on research on our data and machine learning teams for our own internal MT solutions, for machine learning systems, for quality assessment, for all of these different things. When we talk about machine translation, it's really like just a small subset of a much bigger box, I guess. Could you talk a little bit about where maybe what machine learning is and then how machine translation fits into that puzzle?
Sure. So traditionally, programmers would come in and we'd tell computers to do rules, right? Do this, do this, do this, specific rules to kind of drive a machine forward. So today with machine learning, it's a little bit different. We go to a computer, we're like, we want this outcome. We can give it some data and even sometimes just teach it how to do experiments. And then it itself can kind of take the data, learn, and then approach this outcome. So it's the machine taking these kind of inputs and learning to do what it needs to do. And machine translation is a subset of this, where we give it, a bunch of source strings, a bunch of translations, and it kind of learns how the words all associate with each other. Then it learns how to, over time, give you the translations that you would want on the other side.
Right. So it's automatically adapting to the experiences that it has and new data that's fed to it in real time.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's sort of a machine translation on its own is interesting, and of course machine learning is, because it does feel like kind of a black box, and you just don't know what you're going to get out, and you hope you get something good out. Could you kind of talk about maybe the custom machine translation, in that there's multiple facets to it? There's of course training and things, but also how do you know if it's actually good?
Sure. So I'm sure, as everybody here is aware, around 2016, there was a revolution in machine translation, right? We went through the old way in the aughts. That was always a little not great. You could kind of make out what it meant, but it was always very, very machine feeling. And then over, the last 5 or so on years, has become more and more human. Definitely not perfect. Definitely very technical and straightforward, but much more organic in feeling. And custom MT is kind of the next step on that. We have, many customers. You have brand names and voices and, all types of things that wouldn't work well in a generic MT engine. You have words that'll be translated straight across that'll never work right. So if you have a large MT batch of content, you'll be constantly getting these bad translations and just awkward. So there's a number of different ways to approach this, and custom MT is one of the ways you can do that. So the high level way is you take your translation memory. So, you've been paying for human translations the entire time. You have this nice kind of box of these things, and you want to bring it to the next level. You can bring it over to one of these MT engines and just kind of train them in. And then, at the end, you'll get this model that is more similar to your voice and your brand than the generic engine will be. And it'll produce higher level starting translations for you.
Yeah, that's an important piece. It produces higher level starting translations. So you probably still need linguists to review it, or you still need a quality assessment at the end to know if your trained engine is any good. So it's not just put content into a thing and expect it to be great and just move forward. There's still a lot of process that needs to be involved.
No, absolutely. We have definitely seen custom models leading to custom problems. But overall, the experience with most of the people we know who've done it have been remarkably positive. And there's some effort to verify these things at the end. But generally, I feel like the industry in this decade, customizing, bringing glossary, TM, and MT together is definitely kind of where we're headed.
Yep. Yeah, it makes sense. I know a lot of customers, when I'm on calls with customers, they're always asking about, we want a custom MT engine. We really want this. But it's always unclear what the next step is for that. And I think if you're setting something up like that, you have to go to Amazon and set up an instance, or Google and set up whatever, and upload your file and connect all the APIs and all this type of stuff. So it can get complicated. And just on the product side, we are thinking about ways where it can just be an easy button to kind of get that going for customers, so that it isn't so painful. Ben, you bring up an interesting point, and Valerie, maybe you can also talk about this. You mentioned all of these different things in the toolbox, and Valerie, I guess from your point of view, thinking about all these different tools, like what really is the starting point that people need to be thinking about for when MT might be involved?
The type of content they're dealing with, for sure. And because machine translation can be very efficient for or produce a really nice output for certain types of content, which is, for instance, something that is repetitive or very, very dry, long sentences. But as soon as you're looking at creative content, something that needs to be really with a certain rhythm or very localized, the machine might fall short. So I think of MT as one of the tools, and machine translation can be certainly a good tool for certain types of content, and others, the translation memory and the human touch are very much necessary. And sometimes it's a combination of both, right? And there also you certainly need to make sure that your whole process includes the foundation, the glossary, the style guide, and all the preferences that are being shared with the translators so that they know where to go.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. And I know, being on the language services side, you are always pushing customers to have a good glossary, and MT engines now, and Ben, correct me if I'm wrong, I think I'm pretty sure that Google and Amazon both support uploading term bases into their systems.
I know Amazon does for sure. I believe Microsoft does as well.
Okay, Microsoft does as well. Yeah. So yeah, it's important to have that foundation. And in thinking about having that foundation and glossary terms and all these different tools in the toolbox and the custom MT model, it doesn't become a good model unless you have all of that foundation. And Ben, you said something the other day. Everyone is familiar with MT post edit, where there's something was machine translated and then an editor edited it and then it was published. You said something the other day, like everything is MT post edit because everyone has access to machine translation, and then whether they're using TM or something, they have some sort of starting point probably, and they're really just editing whatever that starting point is. Maybe not quite that clear, but there's some a little bit of truth to it. So is it fair to say that, Ben, that a custom trained MT is really a human in the loop and like MT post edit?
Yeah, I mean, you can consider it that, yeah. So for custom models, you want to build them from your TM, and TM comes from humans, right? You don't want to have empty strings for your TM. We generally don't allow it without humans intervening and being like, all right, these are good, these can go in. So yeah, everything that goes in your TM should have a human touch. Everything that goes in your custom MT will have a human touch, and then there is a bit of a more human element in the resulting model at the end.
Right, makes sense. And Ben, one question that comes up all the time from customers is like, what translation engine should I use? There's Google, Microsoft, Systran, Amazon, DeepL, a million others, my own custom one that I made on my computer. What's the best, or how do you determine what MT engine to use? Which is the best one? You're on the spot.
Yeah, so this is one of those unfortunate questions of none of them are and they all are type of a situation. Right. So when you look at like the average over most of the like high tier providers, they all perform very similarly on average from each other, right? Like no one is knocking it super out of the park versus somebody else. However, for certain locales and certain domain specific categories within those locales, some of them do start bubbling up more than others. So definitely some customers will have better luck with certain providers than others for their content. And again, the question is, how do we determine that? So example, as we just mentioned today, we have the cat tool, we have our translator, we can auto propagate, or you can just kind of see on the right-hand side your MT results. You can click on it, you can use it. So we know when stuff like that happens. So we're aware when people are like, oh, okay, that's a good MT result, how much they change and that kind of thing. And we know where the MT result came from. So we can, over time for our customers, measure like, okay, where did they start from? Who did they choose? How much did it change? And then see where the changes are versus, the length of the string and other such metrics. And then kind of get a pretty good idea as like, all right, provider A, they're using a lot and they're not changing it nearly as much as provider B. So provider A is definitely the way to go. So you can do that kind of automated analysis for this type of thing.
Yeah. And that's data that we're also tracking. Like we know the edit distance of machine translation across all the various engines.
Right. Yeah, that's a data-driven approach to kind of solve this problem.
Great. So, I mean, machine translation is certainly at least part of the future. Valerie, if there's hesitation kind of on both sides, and being on the language services side, from the customer, there's some hesitation. From the linguist, there's certainly some hesitation. How do you think we move forward with MT?
Well, I think it's going to be evaluating how you are able to achieve what you need to achieve with the same amount of money, with the right quality for the type of content that you're looking for. That's the customer side, like making sure that the customer get to do what they need to do. But for the translators, it's going to be making sure that this is a tool that is actually helping them and accelerating their work, because they're starting from something that is of good quality. They just are improving, whereas before they would start from nothing. So to me, the future is finding the right balance between allowing the customers to do what they need to do within the needs that they have, while helping the translators to produce it successfully and faster.
Yep, makes sense. And in thinking about that, all of I think the phrases, different translation solutions for different outcomes, there's a different set of criteria and a different set of tools that can be used for what you're wanting to get out on the other end.
Right. Absolutely. So really that's when the dialogue with our customers starts, trying to show them what the best solution is for the type of content that they're translating, and making sure that we match the right solution so they can do it all.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot to think about with how MT can be applied, and when it should be, you should use a custom trained model. When will it be good enough to be used on the homepage of your website versus maybe support tickets? There's a lot of factors that really go into that. I know there's a conversation and a session with Moniz, who's a customer of Smartline, who's using MT to translate all their support tickets. And that's a really interesting use case because they need it back instantly and they need enough information where people can respond. And that's a kind of a clear-cut, like perfect situation for machine translation. But there's also customers who are using it much more broadly across many different types of content. And that's another just interesting use case. But I think like thinking about the application of machine translation and the different types of solutions, and how we can support translators, it really does take just all of these different components, and also the support from a language services team and the localization manager to really make it successful.
Absolutely. And right now we look at quality for all of these outcomes, and we evaluate it mostly in hindsight. Once it's done, we're trying to measure quality and cataloging errors and so on. But maybe in the future there would be a way to evaluate the quality before we start, and how that would go.
Yep, super interesting. And actually, Ben, since you bring that up, Valerie, Ben, maybe you could talk for a second about some of the research and things that you've been looking at for quality assessment.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're researching quality assessment because that exact thing, the ability to be able to estimate the translation of an MT translation, or the difficulty of translating a source string, or all that stuff is, vitally important. And if we can break that open and have a general idea of how well that works, And that will help everybody out, right? Because then you can do really cool things of like making sure the strings get to the appropriate place in the workflow, which is fantastic.
Yep. Yeah. And that really is, as far as the umbrella of machine learning, we have machine translation, which is one part of it. I mean, one of a million different parts, but another component of that could be machine learning for quality assessment and building models to predict quality rather than just assess quality at the end. And that's really where you're going to start to see workflow improvements and cost improvements and velocity and things like that, because you could have more trust in what you're starting with.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. If you knew like these strings need to be heavily edited, people should take more time, these strings need less, estimates, the right people for the right job, ability to automatically put things into content categories, also super useful. There's a lot of things you could actually do with machine learning to kind of look at these strings, build this metadata, and then do the right thing. Yeah, we're super excited to be looking deeper into this stuff.
Yep. Yeah. I think for all of our customers and those listening, the future for all of these different components are going to be pretty dramatic in their use of the platform and how SmartLing really positions our product for our customers. I think we're almost out of time. Valerie, any final thoughts on looking ahead for machine translation?
I want to say that we should all be excited about machine translation and not look at it, as translators look at it as the enemy. And on the contrary, I'm sorry. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I think we should look at the future and machine translation and get excited about it and not look at it as something that is not the right quality. We should look at how it is evolving and how it is actually helping a lot of us while we are working.
For sure. Yeah, machine translation is here to stay. So we probably need to embrace it. Ben, any final thoughts?
No, just similar to Valerie. Like today, there's a ton of content out there created by users, via e-commerce or sport tickets or anything else where MT is 100% appropriate. MT is very good at very specific technical stuff, so that kind of context is also great at. But like marketing, any kind of poetry, like Valentine's cards, like MT, not the way to go. So yeah. It's
you don't want a machine translated Valentine's Day card?
Seems like a great meme, but no, not today.
Yeah. The future is certainly going to include machine translation. It's really having all of those tools. I think we can all agree, having all of the tools in place. Linguists are still going to be involved. We're still going to need to do quality assessment. We're going to need to do training. And it's just really embracing all of these new technologies. And also we want to make sure that we're optimizing for the customer to make sure that they're getting a good quality outcome, that their spend is appropriate, the cost, all of those components, but also to help the linguists. Like linguists are still going to be involved, and we need to be building machine translation tools and functionality that really helps on both sides. All right, thanks so much for the conversation. We'll end it there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.